Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it's my number 16 team in my 2023 NFL Deep Dive series. It's the New Orleans Saints. Make sure to hit the like, comment, and subscribe on this video. Help with the algorithms, boost this channel up in there, and let's get this place to 1,000 subs. Hopefully I'm already there by the time you guys see this. Probably not, though. So let's go, though. This is the first divisional champion that we're covering. The NFC South is a brutally weak division this year, and I think that sets up for the New Orleans Saints to potentially be a division winner despite not having a winning record. I have them written down as 8-9, but there's a lot of fluidity with this team. I think that they're in a position where they got a lot of interesting talent. My issue with this team is how poorly coached they are. I said it last year, and people criticized me for it. And then it turned out that they were one of the worst coached teams in the entire NFL last season, and that is what inevitably led to their demise, where they ended up being, the 10th worst team in the league. And congratulations, Philadelphia Eagles. Here's Jalen Carter. Thanks, New Orleans. Thanks. But they got a lot of big play potential out on this team. They got Alvin Kamara. We'll get to him. Maybe the suspension's happening. It hasn't happened as of yet. Chris Olave, the returning Michael Thomas, Rashid Shaheed, who broke out last year as like a big play threat. Taysom Hill is obviously in there as well. They signed Jamal Williams, who's like that short yardage back who can come in those goal line situations, punch in those touchdowns. Going to steal some touchdowns from Alvin Kamara even if he does play. They did draft a running back in the third round, Kendry Miller from TCU. So we'll see how that ends up working out for them. Hit my microphone. And then the defense side of the ball, for all the things I've said about Dennis Allen so far, which is that he's probably the worst head coach in the NFL, I would say bottom two with Todd Bowles. Fight me about it. He is a very good defensive coach, and this defense is always very prepared to play every week. Situational football, they're really good, and they've added a piece here or there as well, which should help them carry this team. And I think that's going to put them in a good situation, especially against some young quarterbacks like Desmond Ridder and Bryce Young, and then, whack quarterbacks like Baker Mayfield. So they definitely match up really well against their division. That's really, at the end of the day, all that matters when you're in a really weak division. I think that their only strong competition is going to be Atlanta this season, and I just think that they're a step above Atlanta in terms of just the quality of their roster in general. They got a lot of veteran talent, Tyrann Mathieu, Marshawn Lattimore, Cameron Jordan, who's easily the most underrated and underappreciated player probably in the NFL. He's got like superstar ability. He just doesn't do things in a flashy way. And he had a little bit of a down year. Maybe he's on the down end of his career. I mean, he's been playing for over a decade now, I believe. Yeah, at least over a decade, I would think. But he's still got that great ability to be a 3-down defensive lineman. Maybe they kick him inside. Maybe that's a better place for him this late in his career. They did draft Isaiah Foskey out of Notre Dame. So as he develops through training camp and throughout the year, he may not be ready yet to get super starter minutes, starter play, and whatever, but there's a great potential there as well. Maybe you kick Cameron Jordan to the inside and Foskey plays on the edge, but we'll get to all that stuff. But yeah, we got to start with this coaching staff, which is the inevitable downfall of this roster. So we got the head coach, Dennis Allen, who I don't understand how he's still a coach after last year. They were so terrible last year. I don't get it. He got the job kind of as like a last resort, it seemed, type of a thing, where they didn't want to break up the staff. He was a great defensive coordinator, so they wanted to keep him around. I understand that. But if you're this desperate to keep him as a defensive coordinator to run the defense, I don't know, man. I really just, I don't know. I think Dennis Allen is a terrible head coach. Tremendous defensive coordinator, but that does not translate into being a head coach. We've seen it with countless people. And I think that And it goes in the reverse as well. I think you see the Patriots bringing in Bill O'Brien to be the offensive coordinator, and people are laughing at them like, oh, did you not see what he did in Houston? It's like he was in a completely different role in Houston. It's a completely different role, and that's the problem when you get these like social media people who have never actually participated as coaches or haven't even played, or if they have, it's been so brief that they don't really understand and grasp the concept of the different roles that coaches have and how they're completely different worlds when you become a head coach compared to a coordinator, compared to a positions coach. And Dennis Allen, he's up there with Todd Bowles. Where if you're saying, hey, you wanted them to be a defense coordinator, put them at the top of the list. You want to be a head coach, put them at the bottom. Dennis Allen's had plenty of opportunities to show that he could be a tremendous head coach. He's gotten so many opportunities. I think he was the coach of the Raiders for a while there. Coach of the Chargers. Was he the Chargers head coach? I think he was just the Raiders head coach. Right? I think he was just the Raiders head coach there for a while. And it was terrible. They were terrible under Dennis Allen. So, I don't know what else I can say other than just to continue to pile on to Dennis Allen. And then their defensive coordinator is Joe Woods, who came over from Cleveland. He was just Cleveland's defensive coordinator last year. They were 4th in passes defended, and they were 5th in opponent passing yards per game. So there's that. There is that. But he also had one of the best defensive ends in the entire league on that roster. He had one of the best cornerbacks in the league on that roster. So naturally, I feel like unless you're completely incompetent, you're always going to have a pretty damn good pass defense. And now he's coming to this team. He gets Cameron Jordan. He gets a little bit more balance probably on the defensive line. In the secondary, I think it's a little bit worse. I think Lattimore and Denzel Ward sort of cancel each other out. But I think the depth that Cleveland had at the cornerback position and the safety, quarterback position in particular, is better than what the Saints have now. And I think that the Saints are probably better at safety with Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus May than what Cleveland had. So maybe it balances itself out. Maybe they all just cancel each other out and it's sort of one and the same. But coming in with Dennis Allen's defense, I think he's been put in a position to really succeed. But I think that would have been true for pretty much anybody who got that role. Sounds like I hate this coaching staff. They are my 31st coaching staff for a reason. And then the offensive coordinator is Pete Carmichael, who last year I said I'm like, this guy now taking over on his own without Sean Payton, I guarantee you there's going to be significant setbacks. And every Saints fan in the comment section was like, he was calling the plays already and blah, blah, not understanding how coaching works. Because it was Sean Payton's scheme, it was Sean Payton's game planning, and then Pete Carmichael took all of that and then was just basically handed a script for him to read off of each and every week. So I mean, this is what we're getting here with Pete Carmichael. Is he's given enough talent and he's sitting on a scheme from Sean Payton that as long as he mildly stays the course, this offense is going to be effective. They will not be some top flight offense. Now, the big thing this offense does have that he can take advantage of is the variety of the rushing attack. They got 3 quality running backs to turn around and hand the ball off to on first and second down. Kamara, Jamal Williams, and then even Kendre Miller. And then in the passing game, even they can even do stuff with Taysom Hill. I can't forget about Taysom Hill. Then in the passing game, and the running back room, they got some good variety there. Benjamin can take a little step up there. You can line up Taysom Hill in the backfield And there's just a lot of variety that he can have, which is always going to keep defensive coordinators on their toes. You got Rashid Shaheed, who you can just do these little gadget plays with. Chris Olave, one of the best young receivers in the league. He literally made the college career of Justin Fields. Go take a look at the numbers of Fields with and without Chris Olave. So kind of like Joe Woods, and they're given enough talent where there's going to be a higher floor, I think. I think last year was the worst that they could possibly get. Yeah, there was inconsistencies, there were some injuries that they had to work around. But because the coaching staff in general is not quality, I don't care what you guys say, okay? It's not. It's going to be really difficult to get this team to the next level. I think with Derek Carr, you got an interesting quarterback situation. With the defense, you got some good depth pieces. Really, you got all the right pieces in the right place for the defense, depth-wise and starter-wise. It's just this staff is not going to get them to that next level. I think they'll easily, I have them winning the NFC South. They're going to exploit a weak division. But if you were to give this roster a top 15 coaching staff, this could be an 11-12 win team. But because you got this baseline here for this low-end coaching staff, I mean, again, argue with me all you want. I said it last year, this coaching staff was trash, and they're not any better than they were last year. So argue with me in the comment section. I welcome it. But let's get to the player grades. So we'll start with the quarterback, and it's Derek Carr. I give him a grade of 72. He's coming into a situation where, again, with the scheme he's going to have to learn and all that, I don't know that he's going to have a lot of true success in the passing game. I do think that the running game is going to be what inevitably drives his team this year, just because they have so much variety in that. I think the short passing game is going to be where this team really thrives. Derek Carr has always been historically somebody who doesn't necessarily push the ball down the field as much as maybe he should. But when you get a guy like Michael Thomas who's coming back, slant god, you got Taysom Hill, you got Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, who came over from the Raiders as well. Shout out to him for overcoming I think it was leukemia. Good running backs out of the backfield like Kamara, who, again, isn't suspended yet. So can't anticipate it being a long-term suspension, even if he does get it. How they use Chris Olave, who is really the deep threat on this team. Will it encourage Carr to push the ball down the field, or are they just going to run quick intermediate routes with Olave as well? That'll be something to watch out for. Jameis Winston still there as the backup. Then they drafted Jake Haener, the zestiest looking quarterback in the NFL. I think that there is an outside shot that if this team struggles, they'll turn to Haener before they turn to Jameis. I think that's just a real possibility. But I think Carr has the capabilities to be really good. Now, if he can overcome the lack of guidance he's going to have from the people above him in this organization, then this team could really, really be a threat. Now we're here taking a look at the rushing threats, and I did nerf Alvin Kamara a little bit in terms of his grades and the projection that he's going to have just because of the suspension capabilities. I don't know that it didn't change really their rankings in the running game or the passing game. The averages still worked out to where they were in the same spot. But he still gets an 84. Jamal Williams gets that 76. Very specific type of back. You're not going to see Jamal Williams on third down. He's going to be that first down, second and short, second and medium running back. Kendre Miller, I personally believe he was drafted as the insurance policy, it seems, for Alvin Kamara. And potentially, I think he'll take little pieces from each of those top two running backs on the roster. And then you got Eno Benjamin, who sort of kicks in there. He's not going to be a guy you get the ball to on first and second down, I don't think. But I think he is the backup sort of receiving back. So if Kamara does get suspended, we're going to see Eno Benjamin, I think, in that role above Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller, who just don't grade out well as receiving backs and third down backs. But again, Alvin Kamara, again, I had to nerf it because I'm assuming he's going to get maybe a 6-game suspension. So, and that's ideal because their schedule early on is not that strong. So I guess you got to kind of hope that it's a 6-game suspension, gets it right away early in the year. But his contributions are not going to be as much overall, so hence the lowered grade. Maybe Kendre Miller, you can maybe coach him up to do it. Jamal Williams sort of is what he is at this point in his career. So maybe Kendre Miller gets opportunities there to show some development, to show some growth as a receiving back. That's also a real possibility. He was a 3rd-round pick. So I think you have to look at that as significant, that they actually drafted him with significant plans for him, because I don't think you're going to take a running back in the 3rd round without having an idea of where you want him to be, which is you hope you can get your running back to be an all-purpose back and at least develop him into that. So I think that's going to be the goal for Kendre Miller. So despite being probably the worst coming in, I would say that especially if Kamara gets suspended, that he's going to see some 3rd down work early in the year, just so they can sort of see in live action what they got in him in that sense. Now moving on to the receivers and the tight ends. We'll start with Taysom Hill, who gets an 80. That's what I did with Taysom Hill's grade is a little different than I did with most other players. Is that I took his running threat and his receiving threat, and then I averaged it out to get to the 80. Because in so many senses, he's so much more than just a tight end. He's a running back. He's a quarterback. He's a million different things. And I think his contributions to this offense is significant. Chris Olave, going into his 2nd year, gets an 83. I think he can continue to exceed this. I think he is the number 1 receiver on this roster just because, Michael Thomas, what do you got in him, man? What do we have with Michael Thomas coming out this year? So he gets a 78. I still think that he's good. I just don't know that with all this time off and all this, when he has gone on the field, hasn't looked as good. I think there's a real possibility that he's now just a number 2 receiver in the NFL at best. Then you got Rashid Shaheed, who's just a guy who you can do a million different things with as well. You can line him up in the backfield. You can do some jet sweeps, tunnel screens, all that, and he's going to produce. He had some real big play capabilities, and that's going to be what his role is get the ball in his hands, run after catch, trick plays, all that to really get those like 20, 30, 40-yard gains. Just the boom or bust player on this offense. And then you go to the depth pieces. They drafted A.T. Perry out of Wake Forest. I want to say Wake Forest. He's a guy that I think is drafted as the Michael Thomas sort of backup. Traquan Smith, who's been in this team feels like forever, has gotten opportunities to start. Never really worked out as that guy. I think as a depth piece, he's still a quality player. Keith Kirkwood seems to be just the odd one out, depending on how many receivers they want to keep. Foster Moreau and Juwan Johnson, more traditionally tight ends than Taysom Hill. I think Taysom Hill's going to keep getting worked in, though, as a tight end. But until he gets really comfortable, I think Foster Moreau coming in, having sort of a rapport already with Derek Carr, is going to create opportunities for him as well. And I think you can see a lot of 2 tight end sets coming out this year as well. And using Taysom Hill as sort of like in a lot of motion, just enforcing teams to identify where he is. And I think that's really the strength of this receiving and tight end group is because you have so much variety and you got these guys who can bust out these big plays and be used in so many different ways. It's going to force the defense to play extremely more fundamentally sound and to do a lot of pre-snap identification, which could really work to your advantage throughout games, especially if you run into a more inexperienced defense or just a less quality defense. Then there's a lot of advantages to having this type of skill set variety. Now the offensive line, and boy, oh boy. Okay, so let's start with the tackles, which is really the only strength of this defense. Trevor Penning, who they put a lot of their future into, him and Chris Olave, man. Olave's working out. Hopefully Penning can take the step up. He did grade out pretty well when he did play. And then Ryan Ramczyk is just a solid right tackle. It's the interior guys that are really inconsistent, that are always up and down. Andrews Pete is probably the most overpaid player in NFL history. I don't get it. He's not good. He got Eric McCoy at center and Cesar Ruiz at guard, who are like replacement level starters, I think, at this point. They had their moments. Eric McCoy, I think, especially had his moments. He had really one good year and then never really came back to that. Cesar Ruiz has always been sort of meddling as mediocre. And you look at some of the depth, James Hurst is actually a really good depth piece for this as like a swing tackle. He can also play some interior. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe at some point throughout this season he ends up being a starter as one of the interior guys. They drafted two offensive linemen, Alex Pihlstrom, who's more just the backup center. Then Nick Saldiveri, who I think is kind of like another James Hurst. He was a tackle. He can play interior. There's a lot of aspects of his game he still needs to work on. But he, I think, is a real threat, kind of like James Hurst, that at some point throughout the year, they could end up being the two new interior offensive linemen on the starting lineup, with Pete and Ruiz maybe going to the bench, or even McCoy going to the bench. Ruiz goes into center. I think there's a lot. There's a threat that could occur just because of how porous the interior is, and we'll show you why. Here they are with run blocking, and Trevor Penning takes a bit of a step up there. Ramczyk kind of the same. But man, the interior again, just not good. Just not a good interior run blocking scheme. They want to get a lot of the runs to the outside. It's just not good. It's not good at all. And then you get to the depth piece. Saldiveri, not good as an interior. Not good as a run blocker, excuse me. James Hurst would still be better than both of the guards in all aspects of his game, which is why I do think that there's a real chance that he's going to end up being one of the guards at the beginning of the year, unless we see Pete and Ruiz take steps up. And Saldiveri and Pihlstrom, they're going to have to work on their run blocking. And I think that's really why they drafted Nick Saldiveri. I think they traded up for him too, on draft day, to make him. So they got a lot invested. They got investment in him. I think him and Kendre Miller. You draft those guys where you draft them because you have plans for them. I think they're ready to move on from Pete and or Ruiz at this point. It's just bringing in a guy that they can mold a little bit and get ready to be the starter perhaps next year, a full-time starter. But I think Saldiveri, if he can show that he's got some run blocking ability, then he's in a position where at some point throughout the season he'll end up supplanting one of those guards. So let's run down the positional summaries real quick again. This is a really good running team. It is one of the best running teams, just with the variety that they have, the blocking ability of the receivers and the tight ends. The real only issue is their interior offensive line. If their interior offensive line steps up, this could, I don't know that they could be the best running game because you still got Baltimore out there, but there's a real possibility this could be I think a top 5 statistically running game. It's the passing game where, is the offensive line going to give Carr enough time? Are they going to scheme things up well enough? Are they going to have Alvin Kamara to help out in the backfield? Like, what's that going to look like in the passing game aspect? So we look at the offensive summary. It is a tale of two offenses. They're my number 2 graded offense in terms of just overall talent. There is a significant gap between them and the number one team, just because the number one team is just ridiculous. But it does give them the 10th overall offense. So the running game is going to open up this passing game, hopefully, for them. I think a lot of misdirection, screen passes, get the ball, run after catch, yards after reception is going to be a real important aspect of this offense, the offensive passing game, that I think will ultimately drive them to being a top 10 offense overall. So I think that they can really use the misdirection in the run game to open up the pass game. That's going to make the pass game supersede probably the overall talent level and help out the offensive line that is maybe a little bit more deficient in that aspect of the game. Now let's go to the defense, and we'll start with the pass rush. Start with the two ends, Cameron Jordan and Peyton Turner. I think are going to be the two guys that we're going to see here. Just because they're interior, they drafted Brian Breezy in the first round, and they got Nathan Shepard from the Jets. And Nathan Shepard is a really good interior pass rush guy. So I think that this is a much bigger set than what you're going to see for a pass rushing front four. Cameron Jordan and Peyton Turner are sort of both much larger 4-3 defensive ends. That I think is going to actually help in certain situations to help set the edges a little bit, maybe open up for some blitzes, some more exotic looks in other aspects at the second and third levels. Then we get to some of the depth pieces here. Carl Granderson really established himself as a early down defensive end specialist. So as he continues to grow, I think he has a real opportunity to maybe steal some passing down snaps as well. I think with Cameron Jordan's age, Granderson and Foskey have a real opportunity to step into that role. And like I said at the top, maybe kick Cameron Jordan to the inside in certain aspects, in certain situations. But outside of those two, Zuniga and Pasagon, there isn't a whole lot of depth here. And I think it could be argued that Peyton Turner is more of the backup to Cameron Jordan. That's sort of why he was drafted. They're sort of the same body type, same type of play style. So there's I think if Granderson and Foskey competing with Peyton Turner for pass rush snaps is, I think, the direction this team is going to be in. They don't have anything interior-wise outside of their top two guys, which I think is going to become a problem throughout the year. They're going to really need somebody here to step up as being a good rotational piece, or we will see Cameron Jordan kick into the inside more often than not, and then we'll see what Granderson and Foskey can contribute across all three downs. So getting to them with the run, this is where Granderson steps in. He was fantastic last year. This is where the real strength of his game is. And him and Cameron Jordan make up probably one of the best tandems on early downs for defensive ends. Contrast that with what's going on in the interior, where they have one of the worst. So this is going to make on early downs, on rushing attempts, in between the tackles, it's going to make the job of the linebacking group on this team a lot more difficult, because Breezy's going to have to really work on that aspect of his game. Nathan Shepard is going to have to, continue to work on that aspect of his game. You got to look at some of the depth pieces here. Peyton Turner still good as an early down rotational piece. Again, which does Cameron Jordan kick inside? Is he maybe too small to play early downs interior defensive line? I think that's something that's going to have to be discussed. But outside of Peyton Turner, Isaiah Foskey really needs to work on his early down work. He's sort of coming into this league as a pass rush specialist, so I would expect to not really see him on first and second down for a lot of this season. And even with the interior depth, Kalen Saunders is kind of at the same level as Brian Breezy. I think you just want Brian Breezy out there as much as possible. He's a first-round pick. If you're going to invest a first-round pick in a guy, you're kind of doing it under the expectations he's going to become an all-purpose three-down interior guy. So really kind of throwing him out into the fire and get him to develop in game situations. I would maybe expect them to look into the interior defensive line free agency class as we get into training camp. Nobody offhand really comes to mind, but maybe get like a true nose tackle could be a possibility here. That's just a little bit better than what they have. I think that there's a lot of there's potential here for somebody to get some real quality playing time that's not even on a roster right now with this team. So let's take a look at the linebacking group. Demario Davis, still quality linebacker. He's one of those guys that on those third down situations, you love to have him out there as a pass coverage linebacker. Pete Werner is sort of like a jack of all trades, master of none linebacker that they have. For sure the established number 2 guy. You're going to see him maybe as more of a traditional linebacker, just sort of playing that middle of the field. Let Demario Davis maybe jump into some man coverage on tight ends and running backs. Go to their depth. Zach Bond, maybe more of a pass rusher. He got drafted. It was kind of a weird spot for him to end up. I think a lot of people expected him to go to a 3-4 team where he can play a 3-4 outside linebacker, kind of like a Kyle Van Noy type of a role. But on this team, he's an off-ball linebacker completely. But he's also the only one that is capable of doing much on these passing downs. Then you get to the rushing downs. They all take a step back. So in a base 4-3, Demario Davis as the Mike linebacker, he's going to need to step up because he's not going to get potentially a lot of help from his interior defensive linemen. Pete Werner is going to have to step his game up as well. Anthony Orji, who was drafted this year, he's got a real opportunity to come in and be the third linebacker in a base early down formation, a traditional base 4-3 formation. Because despite his deficiencies in the pass game, he's coming in with some better than the rest early down play as a run defender. So I think that he'll get some opportunities there as well. And him and Pete Werner will be probably competing if they're in early down sub packages, trying to prepare for the run. He might get opportunities to step up and play just because they might want to save Werner for passing downs in the event they're playing a team that maybe comes out in some bigger sets and doesn't necessarily spread it out where you'll want to have another linebacker in there for like size matchups. But that's really where Orji's going to have his opportunity. Summers and DeMarco Jackson are really just special teams guys on this team. Zach Bond, like I said, probably just more third down. Him and Orji will probably be the guys rotating in and out as you get to different situations on the field, while Pete Werner and Demario Davis especially are the guys that you're going to have on the field probably more often than not. Now we're getting into the pass coverage, and you got Marshawn Lattimore and Tyrann Mathieu, who are quality players. I think still, even Tyrann Mathieu, true number ones, and their position group, a cornerback 1, safety 1. Marcus May is a good complement for Tyrann Mathieu on the back end. Then you got some of these young guys that they've been drafting over the last couple of years, Paulson Adebo, and why am I blanking on this? I'm friggin' why? I want to say a Caleb Evans, but it's not. It's Alontae Taylor. Yeah, I was gonna say a Caleb Evans. I'm like, no, that's the guy's not on this team. It's Alontae Taylor. I really liked Alontae Taylor too at Tennessee. So just this is what happens when you're dealing with every single team and every single starter. You start to mix up guys like Caleb Evans and Alontae Taylor. Alontae Taylor and Paulson Adebo from Stanford. See, I know where they played. Alontae Taylor went to Tennessee. Paulson Adebo went to Stanford. Thank you very much. Marshawn Lattimore went to Ohio State, right? Anyway, brain farting. I really liked them when they picked them up. And I think them being compliments to Marshawn Lattimore provides a lot to this cornerback room, especially on these passing situations, which is really where it matters most for these position groups. Even as depth pieces, they got really good depth. I actually really like the depth. They got Bradley Roby, who's like that veteran replacement level guy who can come in situationally. Isaac Yadam, great special teams player. Then you got Lonnie Johnson, who's a safety. He can also play some corner. They drafted Anthony Johnson and Jordan Howden, who I think can come in and be contributors early on. I think as the season goes on, you'll probably want Anthony Johnson playing over Bradley Roby if you could help it. Jordan Howden, I think, is going to be more competing for a roster spot with a guy like Jonathan Abram, who hasn't ever really worked out. You know, he had some flashes with the Raiders being a first-round pick, but it's never really come to fruition for him. Now taking a look at their run support, their top three corners aren't great run support guys. I'll say that. That's kind of putting it lightly. Tyrann Mathieu has, he can contribute, but his size and his age is sort of starting to work against him. Marcus May, sort of just like a, all-purpose safety. A little bit better in pass coverage, of course. Then you get to their depth, and this is where they really suffer. They really suffer in the run support aspect for this group. I do think Jordan Howden beats out Jonathan Abram because Jonathan Abram's skill set, his body type, and the way that he can fly around the field suits run support better, but he is worse at run support than he is in pass coverage. At least he was last year, and I think the year before that as well. Lonnie Johnson, not a great run support guy, converted to safety. So he's got more of a cornerback mentality in the run game. Bradley Roby is just horrific. Don't even count on him. Isaac Yadam, because he's a great special teams player, he'll put his, he'll stick his nose in there. Anthony Johnson, sort of the same argument there. I think you'll see him play a little bit more aggressive, and he's going to get some opportunities, I think, to get on the field more often than I think people are anticipating early on this year. I think he's got the potential to be a bit of a surprise breakout on this roster. I think in dime formation and even in nickel, they might want to take a guy like Alontae Taylor off the field, depending on what the matchups look like, and maybe Anthony Johnson steps in to be a little bit more of an aggressive run support guy on maybe first down. Or as we get later in games, you want a more sure arm tackler. Maybe that's where Anthony Johnson gets on the field as well. Maybe even Isaac Yadam gets on the field in that situation as well. Just because of how poor everyone else seems to be in run support, they're really going to have to work on that aspect of their game across the board here. So we're just going to run through the position summary here. There's some balance in this pass defense. I think it's going to be a good pass defense in general. And they got some interesting depth pieces as well across the position groups here. Maybe linebacker and interior is not exactly where they have the depth, but I think even at edge rusher, they got some interesting depth pieces there, at least with the two backups, the third stringers that are sort of roster bubble players, sort of inconsequential. Then you get to the run defense, probably the best edge pairing, maybe the worst interior pairing, which I think this overall their run defense is going to be the ultimate liability for this defense, which I think is going to hurt them throughout the year in games where they fall behind, because then they're going to have to get away from the run on the offensive side of the ball and start to become a more traditional drop back pass team, which is going to allow teams to sort of pin their ears back and take advantage of how poor the interior offensive line is. So again, kind of like what we saw with the offense, it's a tale of two different schemes here, almost two different defenses altogether. The 7th best pass defense graded out, but the 29th rush defense. And this is where coaching, I think, would come into play so significantly, and they just don't have it. Middle of the pack defense, though. So they're still going to be a team that can win this division. I think they can win it maybe a little bit more easily than what I even have projected for them. But again, the risk for this team is that they're going to fall behind in games and not be able to catch up because they won't be able to stop the run. and having to drop back pass, you get some interior pressure, which should be easy to come by for a lot of teams. You're gonna have a lot of collapsed pockets, and Derek Carr's not, he's not exactly Lamar Jackson when it comes to being a scrambler. So that could really affect their game and really prevent them from being effective in having to come back to win games. So just taking a look at their schedule here, and they're potentially a streaky team here. I got them winning their first 4 games and then dropping the next 4. It's a good start to their season. This is what I mean about if they lose Alvin Kamara for 6 to 8 games, the schedule is good enough where they should still be, 4-4 or better. If he's just, let's say, suspended for 8 games, they should be 4-4 and better. They are running into Minnesota, Atlanta, Detroit, and the Giants towards like that middle of their schedule, which, I got them splitting with Carolina. Got them splitting with Atlanta. I got them sweeping Tampa Bay in their division. But they can end the season strong too, which I think this is an important end to their season, getting the Rams, Tampa, and Atlanta. It's going to allow them to recover from a little bit of a rougher part of their schedule where they got to get Jacksonville, Chicago, Minnesota, Detroit, and the Giants. And then it's really about how they compete within their division, and going 4-2 in the division should be enough where they can just pick up some wins here in some of those easier games, like I have the Rams, Green Bay, Tennessee, so they can end up actually taking the division. And then once you get in the playoffs, that's the key. Get in the playoffs and then see what kind of a threat you can be. And I think that they have the ability, if they can get into the playoffs, to actually be a surprise team that might be able to pull off a playoff win or two, depending on how it all lines up with the other teams. So just running through the quick summary here, 8-9, they are the NFC South champions by my estimation. 4th in the conference because, the worst divisional winner. 16th in the league, but they have one of the worst coaching staffs in the NFL. 10th total offense, 16th total defense, but they are going to perhaps struggle in specific aspects of the offense and the defense. The run defense and the pass defense, I think, could end up being liabilities for this team. There it is, my number 16 team in my 2023 Deep Dive series, the New Orleans Saints. Thank you for making it this far. Make sure to leave the thumbs up button and then subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the future videos. I got the video here and a playlist here. There they are. Boom, boom. Boom, boom. And I will see you guys with the next video. We are into the top half of the league now. See you next time.